A whisper shattered the silence. "Please, don't touch me." The voice was frail, trembling, like glass breaking. Elias froze. The ragged, dust-caked blanket stirred. A hand slipped out, shaking violently, thin as a dead branch, fingernails clawing into the dirt as if clinging to life itself. He bent down, lifted the corner of the blanket, and his blood turned to ice. Beneath it was no corpse. Not yet. A girl, no more than 20, her skin bruised, lips cracked, eyes swollen half shut. Her hair, matted and sticky with blood, hung across her cheek. She shrank back, recoiling from his touch, like a wounded animal. The sun had not yet risen when the desert whispered in grey silence. The horizon was bruised in pale violet, and the cold of night still lingered, clinging to the dust like frost. Coyotes had long since fallen quiet, replaced by the hush of a wind dragging itself through brittle sagebrush. Elias Carver rode slow. His mare, a grey with tired eyes, clopped across the hard pan with a rhythm older than the man in the saddle. Elias was pushing 50, skin leathered by sun, beard salted with grey, a man who spoke little and remembered too much. He wasn't looking for anything that morning, only fence-line repairs and the hope of coffee by noon. But fate in the West never asked a man's permission. That's when he saw it. At first, it looked like the carcass of a deer dumped under a mesquite, a heap of rags and bone. Elias slowed, eyes narrowing. The shape shifted, moved. He dismounted, boots crunching gravel. A whisper tore through the silence. "Please, don't touch me." The words were fragile, rasping like glass breaking. Elias froze. The blanket, dirty, tattered, crawling with dust, shifted again. A hand emerged, trembling, thin as driftwood. Fingers clawed into the dirt, as if clinging to the world itself. He crouched, lifted the corner of the blanket, and his blood ran cold. Beneath it was not a corpse, not yet. A girl, no older than 20, skin bruised, lips split, eyes swollen half shut. Her hair, tangled and caked with blood, fell across her cheek. She recoiled from his touch, shrinking back into the earth like a wounded animal. Elias's throat locked. He'd seen men die on battlefields, seen riders dragged under their own horses, but this carried a cruelty only people could carve into each other. He let the blanket fall back, swallowed hard. Her voice cracked again. "Please, if you're like them, kill me fast." The desert wind shifted, carrying the weight of her words across the empty miles. Elias stood, jaw clenched. Memories flickered, of soldiers laughing while prisoners begged, of his wife's screams. The night fever stole her breath. His heart hammered slow, heavy. He could turn away. The West was full of graves no one tended. One more would mean nothing. But as he stared at her, broken, discarded, he felt something stir. Not pity. Not yet. Something older, something human. He knelt again, slow enough not to startle her. "No one's touching you," he said, voice low as gravel. "Not while I'm standing." She blinked at him through a haze of pain. Disbelief flickered, faint but alive. Elias drew off his coat, laid it near her, but didn't force it on. Then he pulled out his canteen, set it down within her reach. The girl stared. Her hand shook as she reached, sipped. Water ran down her chin, but she drank as if every drop fought to pull her back from the edge. Elias watched. The cold inside him shifted, warming just enough to feel like fire. Whatever devils had done this, they hadn't finished the story yet, and he wasn't about to let them write the ending. The desert around them held its breath. Somewhere, a hawk cried out, sharp against the sky. Elias looked at the girl, then to the horizon. Trouble wasn't far behind. He could feel it. But for now, he'd found her. And she wasn't alone anymore. The girl's chest rose and fell in shallow stutters, each breath sounding like it fought its way out of broken glass. Elias crouched there, the desert stretching wide and endless around them, feeling the pull of a decision that would change everything. He wasn't a man who welcomed strangers. Not anymore. Loss had carved too much out of him, but leaving her here would be no different than digging her grave himself. He steadied his voice. "Reckon you can sit up?" Her eyes, one swollen near shut, flickered toward him. Distrust, fear. A flicker of stubborn fire still alive under the bruises. She shook her head once, weak, almost imperceptible. Elias nodded. "All right then, we'll do it my way." He fetched his bedroll from the saddle, spread it out on the ground beside her. Moving slow, he slid his arms beneath her, careful as if lifting porcelain. She tensed, a whisper breaking from her throat. "Don't." "I ain't one of 'em," he said firmly, his voice gravel deep. "And I'll not harm you. Easy now." Her body was feather light, frighteningly so. As he lifted, he felt bones through rags, like she'd been starved near hollow. Her head lolled against his shoulder, the smell of blood and dust heavy between them. Elias laid her onto the bedroll, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, then lashed it gently so she wouldn't slide. The gray mare stamped a hoof, uneasy. Elias gave her a pat, then hoisted the bundle up onto the saddle, climbing behind to steady her. The ride back to the cabin would be a long, rough stretch, but it was the only way. The sun had begun to rise, spilling fire across the desert. Shadows of rock towers reached long fingers over the plain. Elias nudged the mare forward, slow and steady. The girl leaned against him, eyes fluttering half-closed, fighting to stay tethered. "Name's Elias," he said into the quiet, though he doubted she'd answer. "Rancher, just over the ridge yonder. Got a cabin, a roof that don't leak, and a kettle always ready for coffee. You'll rest there a while." She didn't reply. Only a small sound escaped her lips, something between a sigh and a sob. Elias tightened his hold, steadying her against each sway of the saddle. By the time they crested the ridge, heat was crawling across the land, burning the frost from the sage. Elias's cabin sat small against the vastness, logs weathered gray, smokehouse leaning beside it like an old drunk. The corral fence listed where last storm had tested it, and a pile of firewood waited to be split. It wasn't much, but it was his. He guided the mare to the porch, slid down, and carefully lifted the girl into his arms again. Her head drooped against his chest. He carried her through the door, creaking hinges announcing their arrival, and laid her onto the cot in the corner, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and loneliness. The room was dim, cool. Dust motes swam in a shaft of light through the single window. Elias fetched water from the barrel, poured some into a tin cup, then dampened a rag. He knelt by her side, dabbing at her face. She flinched, but didn't push him away. "Easy," he murmured. "Just water. Nothing more." Her lips parted, whispering rough. "Why? Why help me?" Elias paused. The question hit harder than it should. Why indeed? He could have answered a dozen ways. Because no one else would. Because leaving her felt like murder. Because once, long ago, He'd failed to save someone and swore he never would again. But all he said was, "'Cause you're still breathing." For a moment her gaze met his. There was a glint of disbelief, but also something else. Fragile, flickering, like a candle guttering against the wind. He worked quietly, cut away strips of cloth too filthy to keep, cleaned wounds as best he could, wrapping them in what linen he had. The bruises told their own story: fists, boots, cruelty doled out without mercy. Elias clenched his jaw till it hurt. He'd seen men do things in war, but seeing it done to someone so young, left like trash in the dirt, was another kind of evil. As he worked, she drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she stirred, she whispered the same, "Don't touch me." Each time, Elias answered calm, "No one's touching you. You're safe here." Hours passed. The sun climbed high, pouring heat even through the log walls. Elias set a kettle on the stove, brewed broth, thin but warm, coaxed a few spoonfuls between her lips. She resisted at first, but hunger won. "Name?" he asked gently, when she had strength enough to swallow. Her cracked lips trembled. Silence stretched, then barely audible. "Clara." Elias nodded once. "All right then, Clara. You're here now. Rest." That night, the desert was restless. Coyotes yipped at the moon, and the wind rattled loose shingles on the roof. Elias sat in his chair by the door, shotgun propped against the wall, eyes heavy, but mind sharp. He knew what kind of men left a girl broken in the dust, the kind that didn't much care if she lived or died, the kind that might come sniffing around to finish what they started. He stared into the dark, jaw tight. If they came, they'd find more than they bargained for. Elias Carver might have been just a rancher now, but once he'd worn a uniform, carried iron into places where mercy didn't live. He thought he'd left that behind. But maybe the past wasn't done with him. Behind him, Clara shifted on the cot, murmuring in her sleep. Words half-formed, torn from some nightmare. Elias rose, laid a blanket over her, and for the first time in years, whispered a prayer. Not for himself, but for her. The desert held many secrets, and this girl carried one of them. Elias knew it was only a matter of time before the truth, and the danger it carried, came knocking on his door. But for now, she slept, and he kept watch. The days slipped by like sand through a fist. Elias rose with the dawn, tended the grey mare, split wood, fetched water, always with one ear tuned to the cabin. Inside, Clara lay on the cot, her breathing growing stronger, her eyes opening a little longer each day. Healing came slow. The bruises on her face faded from purple to yellow, the swelling easing. But the bruises deeper, the ones you couldn't bind with linen, still lived in her voice, in the way her shoulders tensed each time he stepped too close. Elias never pressed her. He spoke little, moved slower than he had to, careful not to startle. He left food within her reach, water by her side, and let silence do its work. On the fourth evening, while the desert burned red with sunset, Clara spoke more than a whisper for the first time. "They sold me," she said, voice flat, brittle. Elias paused, halfway through sharpening his knife. He set the blade down soft, turned toward her without speaking. Clara's eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if she were talking to the cracks in the wood. "My pa died when I was little. Mama, she remarried. Thought she was giving us a better life. But he drank. Hit her. Hit me. When she passed, he didn't keep me. He traded me, like a sack of cornmeal." The words hung heavy, thicker than the smoke curling from the stove. Elias felt his chest tighten. He'd known men like that, He'd buried men like that. Clara went on, her tone like ashes. The men who took me, they laughed, said a girl's only good for one thing. They, her voice broke. She pressed her face into the thin pillow, shoulders trembling. I prayed for death, and when they were done, they left me, like garbage. Silence swallowed the room. Outside, the coyotes yipped, their voices thin and cruel against the fading light. Elias sat, hands curled on his knees, jaw clenched until it hurt. Finally, he said, voice low, "You're not garbage. You're still here." Clara turned her head, eyes shining in the dim glow. There was no belief in them, not yet, but there was the faintest flicker of something else. Defiance, maybe, or the first shadow of hope. The next morning, Elias found her sitting up, weak but steady. She clutched the cup of broth with both hands, sipping slow. Her gaze wandered to the window, where dawn painted the desert in pale gold. "It's pretty," she murmured. "Out there. Almost makes you forget." "Desert don't let you forget," Elias said, pouring himself coffee. "It just buries things deep, but the wind'll always dig 'em up again." Clara glanced at him, studying the lines carved into his face. "You talk like you know." Elias sipped his coffee, bitter and strong. He didn't answer. The memories weren't hers to carry. Not yet. By midday, Clara had found the strength to stand, holding on to the cot's frame. Elias watched from the table, ready to catch her if she faltered. But she didn't ask for help. She gritted her teeth, shuffled a few steps, then sank back down, sweat beading her forehead. "You're stubborn," Elias said. Her cracked lips twitched into something near a smile. "Guess I am." It was the first time he'd seen her smile, and for a heartbeat, the cabin felt less like a tomb. But peace in the west was a brittle thing. That night, as the fire burned low, Elias sat cleaning his rifle. Clara dozed on the cot, drifting in uneasy dreams. Then came a sound, the faint clop of hooves far off, muffled by distance but sharp to his ears. Elias froze, every muscle tight. The desert wind carried more than dust. It carried trouble. He set the rifle aside, moved to the window. In the moonlight, far across the plain, shadows shifted. Riders, 3, maybe 4. Moving slow, like men who weren't in a hurry because they believed nothing stood in their way. Elias's stomach sank. He knew their kind. He returned to the chair, shotgun close at hand, and waited. The riders didn't come closer that night, not yet. But their presence gnawed at him. If Clara had spoken truth, and he knew she had, those men wouldn't let go easy. A girl wasn't just property to them. She was proof of power, and losing her meant losing face. They'd come back. Elias looked at Clara, sleeping restless under his blanket. He'd sworn to himself he wouldn't get tangled in other folks' wars again. But wars had a way of finding him. The following day, Clara sensed it in him. She watched as he worked outside, mending the fence with sharper movements than usual, eyes flicking often to the horizon. When he came in, sweat darkening his shirt, she asked, "They're coming, aren't they?" Elias paused, meeting her gaze. He didn't lie. Likely. Her hands clenched the blanket around her shoulders. "Then I should go. If I stay, I'll bring them to you." Elias shook his head. "If you go, you won't last the day, and if they find you, they'll drag you back to hell. I won't allow it." Clara stared at him, bewildered. "Why? You don't even know me." Elias's eyes darkened. "Don't need to. I know men like them, and I know what's right. That's enough. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Clara's chin lifted, just slightly, as if some of her lost strength had returned. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Elias cleaned his guns by lamplight. Clara watched from the cot, silent. She saw the way his hands moved, steady, practiced, like a man who'd lived too long with steel. Finally, she whispered, "You've killed before." Elias looked at her, eyes heavy with things unspoken. "War taught me how. Life taught me when." Her gaze held his. "Will you kill them?" The question hung like smoke. Elias didn't answer right away. He slid a bullet into the chamber, the click echoing through the small cabin. Then he said, "If they come here to take you, then yes, I will." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. For the first time, Elias saw not just fear in her, but also trust. Fragile, new, but real. Outside, the desert stretched infinite and silent. But somewhere in that silence, danger was moving closer. Elias knew it, and when it arrived, there'd be no turning back. The fourth day broke hot and windless. Heat pressed down on the cabin, thick as a hand around the throat. Elias worked the corral, sweat dripping, eyes always sliding to the horizon. Clara watched from the window, her face paler but stronger, bruises fading into faint reminders of what had been done to her. By noon, the sky turned strange, yellow haze, the kind that made a man's nerves prickle. Elias knew before he saw them. Trouble never crept. It rode tall, loud, certain. The sound came first, hoofbeats, steady and sure, carrying the weight of men who believed the land already belonged to them. Elias wiped his brow with a rag, set down the hammer, and walked back to the porch. Clara stayed inside, her hands clutching the frame of the window. Dust rose on the plain, 4 riders, sun at their backs, so their faces were shadows. But Elias didn't need details. He could feel the stink of them. Cruelty carried like a banner. The lead rider raised a hand, signaling the others to slow. They approached deliberate, not a hint of hurry. That was the worst part. Men who thought nothing could stop them never hurried. Elias stepped off the porch, shotgun resting easy in his grip, his boots pressed into the dust, steady, patient. The leader reined in a tall bay horse, leaned forward in the saddle. His grin was a slash of white in the shadow. "Afternoon, old man. Fine day for company." Elias's jaw worked. "Can't say I invited any." The man chuckled. "Hospitality don't always need an invite. We're just looking to collect what's ours." Behind him, the others shifted in their saddles, eyes sweeping the cabin. Elias didn't turn, but he felt Clara stiffen inside, breath caught in her chest. Elias's voice stayed flat. "Ain't nothing here belongs to you." The leader tilted his head. "Funny thing, we got reason to think otherwise. Girl went missing. Pretty little thing. Can't have run far in her state. Now." His eyes gleamed under the brim of his hat. "A man like you wouldn't keep something that weren't his, would he?" Elias's fingers brushed the shotgun stock. "I don't keep people, and I sure as hell don't trade in 'em." The man's grin faltered, twisted into a sneer. "Careful, old man. You standing between us and what we own. Law won't see kindly to that." Elias spat into the dust. "Law don't ride with you. Just vultures in boots." A silence fell heavy. The other riders shifted, hands sliding near their pistols. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Inside, Clara pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. She could hear every word. Finally, the leader sat back in his saddle, feigning ease. "Tell you what, we'll give you till sundown. Hand her over, no fuss. We'll be on our way. Otherwise," he leaned forward, grin back in place, "you'll wish you had." He wheeled his horse, the others following. Dust swallowed them as they rode off. Not far, just enough to make camp within sight. Waiting like wolves. Elias watched them go, shotgun heavy in his hands. His heart thudded steady, not fast. He'd known it would come to this. The only question now was how far he'd go. Inside, Clara's breath shook. "They'll kill you," she whispered. Elias shut the door behind him, set the shotgun against the wall. "Maybe, but I won't let 'em take you." Her eyes brimmed. "You don't understand. They'll burn this place. Tear it apart. I'm not worth—" Elias cut her off, voice sharp. "Don't say it." "Don't you ever say it. You're worth every bullet I got." Clara stared at him, stunned. The words cut deeper than any kindness she'd heard in years. Tears slid silent down her cheeks. The hours dragged towards sundown. Elias moved through the cabin like a man preparing for siege. He checked the rifle, counted cartridges, stacked them neat on the table, poured lamp oil into jars, set them where he could reach, even dragged the heavy trunk against the front door for cover. Clara watched, silent, fear etched into every line of her face. At last she whispered, "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Elias stopped, met her gaze. "Because once I failed someone who needed me, and I'll not carry that shame again." His eyes darkened, shadowed by memories he didn't share. But Clara understood enough. She nodded, pressing her lips together, trying to hold the weight of his promise. As the sun bled into the horizon, painting the desert in fire, the riders returned. This time closer. Their silhouettes stood sharp against the blaze. The leader called out, voice mocking, carrying across the flat land. "Time's up, old man. Hand her over, or we'll come and take her." Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, face carved from stone. He raised his voice, low and steady. "You want her? You'll have to walk through me." The leader laughed, but there was no humor in it. He raised a hand, and the others fanned out, circling. Predators closing on prey. Clara stood inside, clutching the edge of the window, heart pounding. She could see Elias framed against the dying sun, one man standing against four. He looked unmovable, like the desert itself had chosen to fight. The standoff stretched long, brittle. Then the leader spat into the dust, drew his revolver, and grinned. Then so be it. The guns came out. The night was about to shatter. The desert went still, as if the land itself waited for blood. Heat bled from the day, leaving the horizon raw with fire. Elias Carver stood on his porch, rifle steady, boots planted deep in the dust. Across the yard, the riders spread out, shadows cut sharp against the dying sun. Clara pressed herself against the window frame inside the cabin, her breath shallow, heart hammering loud enough she thought they might hear it. She'd seen men fight before, seen cruelty in every shape. But what she saw now was different. Elias wasn't just standing for her. He was standing against something larger, something rotten that had chewed at the West for too long. The leader eased his horse forward, revolver gleaming in his hand. "Last chance, old man. Step aside. She ain't yours. Never was." Elias's voice came calm, iron steady. "She ain't yours either. She belongs to herself. That's something men like you'll never understand." The grin fell off the leader's face. His eyes hardened, a twitch of his finger, and the silence shattered. A gunshot cracked the air. Elias dropped to one knee, rifle barking in reply. The bullet struck the dirt at a rider's horse, sending beast and man crashing sideways. Dust exploded, screams tangled with hooves. The other two swung wide, pistols firing, sparks biting the porch rails. Clara ducked, covering her head, a cry stuck in her throat. Splinters rained across the cabin. Elias rolled behind the trunk, braced at the door, reloading fast, movements practiced from years gone by. He'd told himself he was done with war, but his body remembered every inch of it. The leader charged closer, firing wild. Elias rose, sighted down the barrel, and squeezed. The man's hat flew from his head as the bullet carved air inches from his skull. The leader reined back, cursing, rage twisting his features. One rider dismounted, rushing low across the yard, pistol raised. Elias waited, breath slow, and fired. The man spun, dropped into the dust, his revolver clattering from dead fingers. Clara gasped, tears stinging her eyes. She hated the sight of death, but in that moment she knew if Elias hadn't pulled the trigger, it would have been her life taken instead. The last mounted rider circled, trying to flank. Elias pivoted, but the leader fired first. The shot grazed Elias's shoulder, burning hot through flesh. He grunted, staggered, but didn't fall. Clara screamed his name, instinct dragging her to the door. "Stay back," Elias barked, teeth clenched against the pain. The rider closed in. Elias dropped his rifle, drew the old Colt from his hip, steel that hadn't seen daylight in years. The revolver thundered once, then twice. The rider tumbled backward, horse bolting free. Now only the leader remained, snarling, fury boiling out of him. He dismounted slow, eyes fixed on Elias like a rattler coiled to strike. He twirled his revolver, walking forward, boots crunching deliberate. "You think you can stand against me, old man?" His voice was venom. "I've broken better men than you. That girl's mine, always will be." Elias pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder, Colt steady in the other. He straightened, every line of his body daring the man closer. "She's nobody's property, and if you try to take her, I'll put you in the dirt where you belong." The leader laughed, sharp and cruel, big words from a dying relic. He raised his revolver. The world slowed. Clara's cry split the air. Elias fired first. The Colt roared, the leader's chest snapped back, red blooming across his shirt. He staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, before collapsing into the dust. His revolver slipped from his hand, sinking into silence. The echo faded into the desert. Coyotes howled in the distance, as if singing the man's death into the night. Elias lowered the Colt, breath ragged, shoulder bleeding. Clara burst from the cabin, rushing to his side. She grabbed his arm, her small frame bracing him, though she shook all over. "You're hurt," she whispered, voice breaking. "Had worse," Elias muttered, though his knees wavered. She looked at him, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. You killed for me." Elias met her gaze, eyes shadowed but warm. "I stood for you. There's a difference." Her lips trembled, but for the first time the weight of shame in her eyes lessened. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was someone worth fighting for. The bodies lay still in the fading light, dust slowly settling. Elias leaned heavy against Clara, who helped him back inside. She cleaned his wound with trembling hands, binding it tight as he gritted through the pain. When it was done, they sat in silence, the fire crackling low. Outside, the desert stretched endless, but the threat was gone. Clara broke the silence first, voice soft but clear. "I don't know what comes next." Elias studied the flames. "None of us do, but you'll decide your own way, Not them. Not me. You. Her eyes shimmered. She nodded, a strength in her that hadn't been there before. Then I'll live, because you believed I could. Elias gave a faint smile, the kind that belonged to a man who'd lost much but found a reason to keep standing. That's all the West asks. Just keep living. The night deepened. Elias dozed in his chair, wounded but alive. Clara lay awake on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in years, she felt safe. And in that safety, she made a vow. She would never again let men like those own her life. She was free, scarred, but free. The desert outside whispered its approval, wind sliding over the land eternal. The Old West was cruel, but sometimes it forged men and women stronger than its cruelty. Elias Carver had stood against darkness, and in doing so, gave a broken girl back her name, her life, her tomorrow. And that's the lesson. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to say no more. If this story struck something deep in you, let it sit with you a while. And if you want to hear more tales of grit, sorrow, and redemption from the frontier, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ride with us again.